Okay, so let's understand what is game theory. Now, game theory was basically coined by this very genius professor known as John von Neumann. And you might be surprised to know the kind of applications that actually come out of game theory. The basic idea of game theory is the fact that one person's decision making, in specifically in the competitive scenarios, always has its decisions affected by what the other person is going to be doing. Well, in the business segment, you will obviously see Mercedes decisions will always get affected by what probably BMW is going to be doing in the market. But today we're going to be taking a variation of game theory and maximum times this is actually more applicable than any other variations of game theory, and we're going to be discussing about prisoner's dilemma. If we take the money heist example, consider that the professor is actually strategizing with the team in taking down bank and robbing it. That was all fine until Denver and Berlin actually got imprisoned. This is where it starts becoming interesting because we've got multiple scenarios. You have to understand how law enforcement works, right? So if you've caught two prisoners, you can prosecute the specific convict and get it over with. But most likely, the law enforcement agencies would want to catch the entire team. Just catching one convict is really not going to give them any credit. Try to get them as a state witness, which basically means that they can use them in order to testify in the court and also use them in understanding the operations of the other person, in return giving them incentives by saying that okay, your jail time can be reduced, right? Because now you are a state witness. And if you look at it from the perspective of the prisoners, either you can confess or you can be silent. The four possible scenarios which can actually come out of each prisoner's decision. If Berlin can either be silent about the operation, might just outrightly deny, or you might just confess to the act and probably get less jail time. And the same thing can also happen with Denver, because either he can choose to be silent or he can confess. If you're trying to understand this from the perspective of a single person's view, it will obviously be a very good choice just to be silent, because if there is no other proof that the law enforcement agency has that you have done this act or about this operations, then they can't prove anything, right? However, you have to understand now, when I introduce another player like Denver who has also got caught, there's a good chance that he might not be silent. Now, what is the first situation is that both can confess, and if both confess, they will get 5 and 5 years. To get the second decision, let's say Denver is silent and let's say Berlin confesses. In that case, Denver gets 20 years and Berlin walks free. Right, let's look at a third situation. Berlin remains silent and Denver confesses, then Berlin goes in for 20 years. Look at the fourth situation. Both remain silent. Let's look at the risk and reward ratio, right? Remaining silent, right? So if you look at the remaining silent situation, right, you really don't know to bank on the fact that whether the other person will also remain silent, right? And that's basically the biggest problem, right? So if you look at this matrix out here, I have created various situations out here. Best scenario is obviously both of them to remain silent, but the only problem is that how can you bank on the other person's silence, because you really don't know what the other person is going to do, and depending upon the factor that it's about survival, there's going to be a bit of a doubt which is going to always creep on the person that the other person might be confessing. So if we assume as a prisoner that okay, the other person confesses, if both of them confesses, then you still walk out with 5 years as opposed to 20 years. It's just 1/4 of the punishment that you're actually getting, right? And now I'll take you through a lot of examples in which the same prisoner's dilemma concept actually works. Like, consider the weapons race in the world, right? Now, the weapons race in the world is pretty funny because everybody thinks that they are becoming more powerful, but actually they are not, right? In fact, if you see China versus US, right, both of them in UN conferences will always either will be criticizing nuclear weapons by third world country who would be talking about peace in general. But if you see what they actually do, let's say for US and China, and if you try to put the decision making in the matrix, you will see that there are two options for both of the countries, either to increase their spending on weapons or decrease the spending. If you consider, if both of them increase, right, so they both of them lose, right? And because taking a lot of chunk of their money and spending it on things which actually don't create jobs and don't increase the quality of life for people. Let's say US becomes the good person and says that okay, we will stop spending on weapon industry, thinking that probably China will also do the same. But the only problem is you really don't know what China is going to do. Look at the other way around also, it's true, right? So if China thinks that okay, let's take the better path and start reducing our spending on weapons, what is the guarantee that the other person is also going to do? And because of this, what actually happens is both of them do not reduce and they both increase. According to the effects of the other person's decisions, they are actually changing. And if you actually look at the statistics, the majority of the spending of, in fact, US still leads the arms race because of the prisoner's dilemma concept. The decisions are always affected actually by what the other person might do, and most likely or not, decisions will not be cooperative, will be more selfish. I'll see you again next week with another video discussing about some other concept.